As Nelson Mandela says, there is no greater gift than the giving one's time and energy to help others without expecting anything in return.
You're listening to Good is in the Details. I'm Gwendolyn Dolske.
I'm Rudy Sallow.
And this is the podcast where we learn what we didn't know in the spirit of Socrates, all with the aim of a happy life, a knowledgeable life. Let's start out with some exciting pod news. Rudy, you and I are going to the great state of Ohio next month to give a talk at the Higher Ed PodCon about podcasting as pedagogy. And
No idea what that means, but you're gonna, you can the part of it will be the comedy on stage while I try to even pronounce that word. But no, please go ahead.
Well, and drum roll, please. What else did we find out about this?
One of our episodes is up for podcast episode of the year by the Higher Ed PodCon. Very honored. I'm not surprised though. It's a pretty incredible episode. I went and re-listened to it. The two guests that we had on, thanks to you, are absolutely incredible. And since they came on the podcast, they've had massive success with their book, Somebody Should Do Something.
Yes.
Super proud.
I mean, that podcast episode was really good. So cheers to Alex Modva, my colleague, Dan Kelly. And also before we get started, I want to give a shout out to Robin Buckley of the podcast That's What She Said. I'm going to be a guest over the summer, but I want to give her a shout out. She was super, super sweet. I asked if she would take a look at my book, Interview with Intention, and she left this lovely review on Amazon. And thank you so much, Robin. And cheers to your podcast. Awesome getting women's voices out there, being honest about our vulnerabilities. I'm going to link it in the show notes. And now we're going to get to our special guest of the day. She is the author of the book Meant for More. She was awarded the Annual Points of Light Award by President George H.W. Bush. She also won the New Jersey Governor's Pride Award. She created this organization, nonprofit called Family Promise, that has over 200,000 volunteers. And this is to help people who are experiencing homelessness. Our guest, the brains behind this, the heart behind this, Karen Olson. And what an absolute treat to have an opportunity to talk to her. And this is so timely as well, because in California news, especially with the governor's race and the LA mayor's race, the issue of homelessness has been coming up a lot. I have not been able to put my finger on something about the way in which it's discussed that kind of is icky, as the kids say, gives me the ick. Because, Rudy and I, you and I talk about this on the episode. Like, you talk about what about some violence or some safety concerns, like when it comes to public transit. Anybody who lives in California or has been around the LA area understands the issue. And I realize what it is that gives me the ick. When people are talking about it, if you can swap out the word homeless for rat in that sentence, and the sentence is still grammatically correct, I think we're talking about it wrong. While I agree that there's a problem, that seems to be universal, and I understand it when I, walk out and it's messy, people are obviously sick, it's not good. But the way in which we talk about it as a problem seems to not really address the problem. And if you don't address the problem, you don't have a solution. We need to recognize that we're speaking about human beings and that there's a reason why they don't have a home. What efforts can we do in order to assist people for whatever reason that they are not in some sort of shelter, instead of looking at the effect of that and wanting to clean up the effect, like just move people away or talk about them like they are rats and not even understand how it happened in the first place. What Karen's work did for me in her book, when I was reading it, I was really moved by it because she's giving us a different window where she is starting from the foundation of we are talking about people. I think a lot of the concerns that we have around it is when you see somebody on the street who is clearly not mentally stable or very dirty and very smelly, focus on that. Those are the most visible people. We take that image image and apply it to every single person who is without a home. The students who live in their car and attend classes, the mom who's working a couple jobs and still can't pay rent. We don't identify that as homeless. We stick with the image of the person who is the most violent or the person who seems to be most chaotic on the street. But that is not actually representative. We only know that because that's what we see. Karen's work is really extraordinary because she gets to the heart of the matter and talking about people's lives and addressing people as friends.
I think you've done a good job of explaining the types of people Karen is talking about on this episode.
Mm-hmm. That was it? Oh,
no.
You were thinking, I'm sorry.
I'm struggling here because this is very complicated and this is very difficult. And it was very difficult to extract this during this episode. Okay. The one act of kindness and the great things that she's done, beautiful, fantastic, great stuff. Everybody in the world should be as kind. But I asked her the difficult question, Gwen, that's on everybody's mind. You just gave the example of, those people that you walk out of your house or wherever you live and the ones that smell bad or they look crazy and you're afraid of them. We're not talking about those people. No. We're talking about these other. Okay, great. What about those crazy people that are out on the street? What about those people that are causing violence? What about those people that are making people scared when they go onto public transit? What's the answer? Mm-hmm. This issue is so hard, but we do a great job of trying to categorize things and say, hey, look, there's a spectrum of homelessness. There's a spectrum of people who actually want help and that can be helped. But there's also people that don't want to be helped because, as you correctly said, they're sick. Mm-hmm. They do not belong on the street. Where do they belong? Well, they belong someplace where they can get some treatment, et cetera, et cetera. But laws are in place where you can only keep people up to a certain number of days. And then it's this rinse and repeat cycle. So the problem is one that is, God, I hate to say it, almost unsolvable, because there will always be some folks who are mentally not capable of taking care of themselves and they wind up on the street. And yes, you're right, Gwen. Those are the people, when you see them, that's what gives us the disgusting taste and start talking about these people as not even human beings, because it makes us feel. Do you know why people talk that way, Gwen? Because when you start thinking about those people as not human beings, you don't feel bad for them, right? You feel better about yourself not giving them $1 or 50 cents or the change in your pocket or even a look. You don't feel so bad when you have to run away from them because they smell so bad, Gwen. Yeah. I mean, we're all human beings here, right? We're human beings. That affects us too. People can tell I'm emotional about this. I am, because I work in downtown LA. I love my city. I'm seeing even more homeless people around where I'm living. And what's the answer? Dude, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. And all these people that are running for office saying that they have the answer. Oh yeah, really? Let's hear it, pal. Let's hear, what's your answer? There's talk, and then there's action plans, and then there's, okay, how are you going to fund this? How are you going to change the laws? What are you going to do? I want to see that. And I'd like to tie some very important things. We talk about an act of kindness on this episode, which is really important. But don't forget, we talked about problem of crime committed by real homeless people that are mentally out there with Matthew Murphy as well. He was a prosecutor. Feeling bad for them isn't the answer. Those that are committing crimes against themselves and others, that needs to be addressed, and not with kindness. That's my opinion.
I actually think that when Karen said she agreed with you about the fear, I don't think this is just a bleeding heart thing. I think it is. It was so the happy. Respect. Yeah, she was looking at somebody you can do better, and I'm here. Yeah. It was, I'm going to, I want to, that's what it was about. But as far as LA, homelessness has dropped by 17%. It doesn't feel like it because it's still so visible, right? When you say, is there a solution? I'm totally with you. It's so difficult. I think we need to look at areas where this is not an issue and see what they're doing, instead of trying to come up with our own solutions, because it's not like it has to be this way, because it doesn't exist this way everywhere. I was asking, I mean, I know somebody in the mayor's office. I was like, how do you even do this? Like when you're clearing out an encampment, for instance, and it is a long process of piecemeal of going to one area, getting everybody off the street, getting their belongings, taking them somewhere else, cleaning up that area, things I hadn't even thought about, saying like some of these people don't even have IDs. The problem is gigantic. It didn't even occur to me, something I just took for granted. So imagine how difficult it would be to piece your life together from such a radical deficit. And then the reason for that radical deficit, like you said, there can be alcohol, substance abuse as well, but issues like children on the street, that's their whole existence, either from running away or from their parents, or a veteran on the street. I don't think anything makes me more angry than to think of somebody who has served in our military is now homeless. That is so outrageous to me, but it happens. The reason why it's so difficult is because the deficit is radical. There is so little left of the person that gives them the tools or the ability to then participate in society. I mean, if you don't have an ID, you don't know how the internet works, you don't have a mailing address, you haven't seen a dentist. What I really enjoy about this conversation is that it is the angle, somebody who doesn't have a stake in the game with the politics or the economics. Like she has nothing to win. She's just telling her story and her experience with people who were able to successfully transition from homelessness to participating. And she refers to them as friends, as family. I think that that's something we need to remember, to not just cast one idea of somebody who is without a home, how they got there, their responsibility, and all that stuff. So that's what I like about Karen's episode.
I agree with that. I agree with that. The wide net of the term homeless or, houseless or whatever the term is it's not fair. And we talk about that on this episode. We also talk about organizations where if you do want to help and you do want to donate and you do want to get involved with, like the Covenant House and some other great organizations, we talk about that here. Gwen, I'm hoping you'll put some links with the episode here just in case this makes people want to
participate. Yes. Let's get our kindness on with Karen Olson.
By the way, that will not be the title of this episode. The title of this episode.
Every chapter starts with these really beautiful quotes by people who have really, really made change. Your outreach to people who are homeless and there's this transition, and I love the way your book is structured where you're telling the stories of people and their situations. What is a myth that you encounter time and again about people who are unhoused? Let's do some myth busting.
Myth is, why don't they get a job? It's their fault that they're homeless or lazy or something like that. That's usually it. If they just try harder and if they didn't drink, if they got a job, they wouldn't be homeless. And the reality is that even working full time, and if you're lower income, you can't afford rent and put food on the table and everything like that. Actually, in the United States, 1 in 30 children are homeless annually. That means there's homeless families that are living doubled and tripled up in their homes, but they're still homeless. But like in the point of time count on the homeless, they only count people who are, that they can see living in their cars or in shelters, but they don't count people who are doubled and tripled up. And that constitutes most of the homeless. In other words, the Department of Education, the most recent counted 1.5 million children who were homeless. And because this school mandates that you count children who are homeless when they come to school, that's 1.5 million compared to 770 that were counted in the point-in-time count. And the point-in-time count is an unfunded mandate that requires cities and towns to count the number of people who are homeless. And sometimes there's just 2 volunteers, and sometimes there's 30. So it's not an accurate count at all. But that's what is reported by the government. 770,000 were homeless in the most recent. So that's an artificial count.
Something I learned from my own experience that surprised me, and I was in my early 20s. I was starting to volunteer at a place, and they said, we're calling this transitional housing, not homeless shelter. The language was so important. I wasn't really familiar with all of the issues. But what they had set up were people who had donated clothes so that people could go look for a job. There were dentists who volunteered, hairdressers, and they had an address and a phone number that didn't say homeless shelter. I didn't understand the scope of the issue of that superficial thing of just go get a job. People not even taking into consideration what an application for, McDonald's is. You need to have an address. You need to be able to show up clean, clothes in order to get the job.
Yeah. So transitional housing is very good because they provide the kind of support the family needs to get back on their feet. They help them look for jobs. They provide food, clothing, everything that's needed. And there's not the stigma of the shelter. That's very much like the organization I created, Family Promise, that has helped over 1 million family members over the past 30 years. And that's much is through the help of volunteers. And it's a holistic approach. It's not just shelter. It's providing the families with what they need, job training, helping them write a resume, helping them search for housing. Yeah, it's a holistic approach. And I think more and more shelters are using that approach. But still, there are shelters that just count bed nights. In other words, they don't count how people are helped. They just count how many nights of shelter they provide. And that, that doesn't show outcomes.
Yeah.
At Family Promise, 80% of the families on average find housing, and we stay with them until they find that. But the average length of stay is about 3 months.
What do you think about the portrayal of homelessness in the media? For example, whenever somebody is running for political office and they say, and we're going to take care of the homeless or we're going to get the homeless out, what goes through your mind when you hear stuff like that? Because for me, it seems like it's centering the issue on people without homes instead of the reason why so many people don't have homes.
Yeah, well, they're just appealing to a public that maybe is disturbed by people who are experiencing homelessness, who are on the street or in their place of business, their coffee shop or something like that. And so they're trying to appeal to, cleaning up the streets and getting the homeless out of there. It depends upon the politician. I mean, most advertise, we're going to make your communities better. I don't see much of, we're going to help them get back on their feet. Although a lot of politicians, for instance, our mayor in Newark, Cory Booker, where he's a senator, Cory Booker, he has a strong housing policy.
Can I, if you don't mind, Karen, this is a very complicated, difficult issue. So if I'm hesitating, it's only because I'm trying to both protect myself as well as ask the question in a very respectful way. But what if people are scared? For example, let me bring up a point of transportation, right? We have out here in Los Angeles a metro system that's built out. That's one of the largest in the world. People don't know that because they don't even consider it, because there is a fear of riding the metro in Los Angeles because, quite frankly, as a writer and a promoter, I have seen homeless people on the LA Metro. Personally, I've never been attacked, thank God. But I actually have a friend who works at the agency who was attacked by a homeless individual that scared her to the point where I feel like she feels too scared to ride on the metro.
Right.
So, I mean, look, and there's that horrible story of that Ukrainian immigrant who got killed by a deranged homeless person on a metro on the East Coast. So this stuff happens. And people go to their politicians and they say, what are you going to do about this? And there is no easy, quick fix. However, people have a right to be afraid, don't they?
Yes, certainly. Yeah, because you get on the metro and people who are homeless are sleeping and, you don't feel safe, or they're talking to themselves in the corner seat. So you have a right to be afraid. Most people are. But when I started this, I don't know, for some reason, I wasn't afraid. When I say I started this, it's after I gave a sandwich to a homeless woman on the streets of New York. I got to know her as a person. She was outside of Grand Central Station, and I got her a sandwich. She said, "Thank you, God bless you. I haven't eaten since yesterday." And she ended up taking my hand. It was at that point I understood more, and we talked, and she became not a homeless person, but a person, and her name was Millie. And that led me to bring in sandwiches every other Sunday for a couple of years with my two sons to Port Authority bus terminal. And so was I scared? I don't know, not really. And the reason for that is I think I have good instincts. I mean, if somebody is screaming in a corner somewhere, I'm not going to go over to them. But the people we met, all had names. There was Abe and Alan and Arthur and Louise. We got to know them as people. And at that point, I wasn't scared. In fact, I even had some of those folks we met in Port Authority and saw Sunday after Sunday back to my house in a suburban community in New Jersey for Thanksgiving dinner. I've never cooked a Thanksgiving dinner, but that didn't stop me, and it all came together. It was beautiful.
That is beautiful, and it's wonderful that you did that, and I think everyone would thank you, and I thank you for that. Speaking of your instincts, I think what you correctly pointed out is there are certain people who could be deranged, and you avoid them. Now, however,
absolutely, I do.
Yeah, and some of those deranged people are on that metro system. People are afraid.
Sure. So they have every right to be.
And so what I'd like to differentiate, if it's possible, I think you would argue for this. Mm-hmm. There are people and families. Thank God I don't see a lot of those homeless families on the metro. I don't see a lot of those homeless families in and around downtown Los Angeles where I work. However,
wait a minute. You might see those homeless families, but you don't recognize them as homeless.
It's a good point. You're right.
Yeah.
My point is, I hate to subgenre or subclassify, but it sounds like the wide swath of the unhoused, there are different categories of the unhoused. It seems to me that like what we're talking about here is there are categories of people that probably could use the help, could use the federal minimum wage or other types of minimum wage to be risen, could use that job training to get back on their feet. Thank God. I mean, I'm behind that.
Sure.
I donate to causes. But there is a whole other category of people that do need to be either A, on medication, or B, housed where they will be safe and others will be safe from them. So what do we do about that category, Karen?
Well, you mean people who suffer mental illness?
Mental illness and the refusing. Or
alcoholism?
I think alcoholism falls under the tenet of mental illness and addiction as well as drug addiction. It is not just me. It's the media. It's probably the politicians. It's probably a lot of people that are like, look, we can, of course, God forbid we ever got in that situation, we would want people to help us. But that other category of the people that don't want to be helped and don't want to help themselves, probably because they don't even have the mental capacity to help themselves, or they believe that those drugs are making them worse off. What is the answer there, if there is one? Because quite frankly, I don't have one. Do you?
Well, no, I'm not sure I have an answer, but it's not that they don't want to help themselves. They're under the influence, say, of a drug or alcoholism, or they have a mental illness. It's not being treated. So to say that they don't want to help themselves, they're not in their right minds. If they were able to get off the drugs, the alcohol, or be treated for their mental illness, you would see a different person, and they would want to help themselves. You have to try to attack the substance abuse issue, and that's not so easy to do because people have to want that help. And the very fact that they're addicted to drugs or alcohol, it's hard to get out of that when you're on the street.
Couldn't agree more. Absolutely. I mean, it's hard to be off of that when you're not on the street. Let's just be honest. I mean, alcohol addiction, drug addiction, whether you're housed or unhoused, is very difficult.
Exactly.
Something to overcome. Plenty of people of means aren't even able to but they happen to have families and support. And the reality is there is this issue, and it is affecting other people's lives, other people's means of commuting, because we all have struggles, whether you're addicted to drugs or not addicted to drugs. Like if you want to get to work and you want to save a couple of bucks because gas prices are going to be $9 or $10, but you're too afraid to ride a bus or ride a metro, what's the answer?
Well, the answer is more government support for rehab and mental illness. But even if that exists, people have free will and they have to want it. And the trouble is they're under the influence, so it's hard. But I've seen wonders, like in the community that I live, in a suburban community in New Jersey. We have a task force on homelessness. In the community, we had 25 people who were experiencing homelessness, and we work with them and we help them get housing. They moved into housing and there was a complete change in who they were. Like my friend Tom, he was on the street. He was drinking and everything and unshaven and didn't care about himself, would swear and so on. But when he moved into housing and we visited him, he was proud. He said, "This is my apartment," and it was really beautiful, small, very teeny, but it was his and he had a place. And so he was motivated to shave and to slowly get off so much drinking. I would take him out to dinner and he was proud. Nobody said, "There's Karen with a homeless man." He didn't look homeless. And so he changed. So the point is, once you have housing, then that's the first step in changing habit. Like some organizations believe in the housing first policy, which makes a lot of sense. Once you're housed, your life can change.
So when there's hope. Now I'm thinking about, Rudy, what you said, people with means have this. Like think about having a rough day and then how many people have a cocktail or there's happy hour because the day was really long and really tough. Now just imagine that is the whole day, every day. So now I see what you're saying, Karen, is that, oh, okay, you have the means in front of somebody that desire that things are going to get better, that things are possible, that makes the turning to the substance a little less appealing. But it's appealing when it feels like everything is just down.
And hopeless, yeah. And then they become addicted. They're lost to themselves and they're viewed as a menace on the streets. And they may very well be. Behavior changes when you drink too much. Some get very agitated. In my trips to Port Authority bus terminal, there were people who were agitated and I would never go near them with my two sons and give them a sandwich. But housing makes a big difference.
Could you tell us from your experience, what are some of the reasons that somebody loses their home? Because I think that the line between the people with means and the people without is actually more like dotted. There's a lot of holes in it that everybody is closer to that possibility than they realize.
Yeah, that's very true. Most people, most low-income people are spending more than 50% of their income on rent when it should be 30%. But people who have decent income can afford to pay for housing. But people who are low income will be spending much more on rent. And along comes a car repair or a medical bill or something. Yeah, they can't afford it, but they try to pay for it. Or do I buy new school shoes for my kids to go to school? Do I put food on the table? With all those choices, they can get behind in their rent and become homeless. So the issue is not homelessness. The issue is poverty. People are just sometimes 1 or 2 paychecks away from losing their housing if something unforeseen comes.
And not all people who are without a home are out of work. Would that be another myth, that there are people who go to a job and they still do not have a home?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The working poor, because the minimum wage is very low at $7.25 an hour, and that hasn't been increased in a while.
So saying go get a job is not very helpful because there are people who are homeless who do work.
Right. And also, there's no state in the country where you can earn the minimum wage and afford a modest 2-bedroom apartment. That's the issue.
I read that an issue for women in particular, sanitary products. And that's something that I've taken for granted.
Yes.
That so many women without homes, they also don't have the money to buy tampons or pads or anything like that?
In my community, there's an organization, Grace, that distributes needed items for low-income and homeless people to agencies that see them. And one of the things that they include is sanitary pads. So there's a whole host of things you normally wouldn't think of, but yet the need is there.
When you look at an area, whether it's in the States, outside the States or states where there is a low homeless population, what is the data or what is the evidence or what is the policy? What is the difference between a place that has a low homeless population and a place that has a high homeless population?
Well, part of it is based on the overall population. Like, for instance, Los Angeles, you're going to have many more homeless people than you are in maybe Duluth. But so what is the difference? It's a population, but it's also policies. Like, do they have a policy or an ordinance to build so many units of affordable housing for every more upper income housing? If they have some policies in place, then you're going to have fewer homeless people and support. But overall, there's been a big cutback in services. Like, the poverty line is just $30,000 a year, and many people fall.
You have in your book this list of kind acts. It really made me smile because the principle of helping the homeless is that we forget that in our everyday lives, the way in which we treat ourselves, the way in which we treat the person in line next to us at the grocery store, that act of kindness, that when we start to practice, could help break down maybe stereotypes or biases in when the stranger is somebody without a home. It's not transactional. And so much of our life, especially in a very American culture, so much is about transaction. How much attention can you get? What can this person do for me? And what you're writing about is another way of relating to people and not thinking of it as transactional, but as simply extending kindness with no anticipation of something in return.
Yeah, that feels very good when you do that, when you help someone with no expectation. I know, for instance, when I came home one time after a busy business trip, there was a big snowstorm. My neighbor, who I didn't know that well, had shoveled my driveway and my walkway, and so I was able to get into my house. And that really surprised me. I thought it was my son's, but it was Ralph across the street who did that for me. He said he didn't think anything of it, but it made me feel really good and appreciated. And I let him know that, As Nelson Mandela says, there is no greater gift than the giving one's time and energy to help others without expecting anything in return. That's it. The gift you get is the good feeling of helping another without expecting anything in return. But it comes to you. Somehow it comes back to you. I mean, I've had many moments of joy in starting Family Promise and talking with families and telling me how much it changed their lives. And the volunteers in our organization, too, talk about the gift of being able to give and to help a family who they otherwise wouldn't have met, but now they've met them. And they maybe go on than just providing shelter and meals to helping them write a resume or practice an interview for a job. And so relationships are formed. And it's not only the homeless families that benefit, it's our volunteers who feel so good about what they do. And sometimes they bring their children to volunteer. It's wonderful to see children who are homeless playing with children who are housed, and nobody knows the difference. It's just children going about the business of play. There's so many rewards.
I saw that. Just before we hopped on here, I had came across that paragraph of the child going with the mother volunteer. Oh, yeah. The child is out playing with the kids there. And then afterwards, the child says, "Mommy, when are we going to see the homeless?" And having no idea.
I love that. That's
yes.
So powerful.
And I think that why your book is so powerful is because it is going into the individual lives, the way in which we say the homeless, as though it's homogenous and almost monster-esque. It's the other that we're just pushing away. They're a problem. You know what, as Rudy said, and if you said that there's also a legitimate fear if somebody somebody has substance abuse issues, normally it's men, but there's a lot of women that maybe there was domestic violence. Maybe the children ran away because they are LGBTQ plus. I've heard that there are a lot of unhoused teenagers for that reason. They've been kicked out.
Yes.
What happens with a minor who is homeless? Because I would imagine if there is a minor who is homeless, let's say they've been kicked out of their home or they ran away, what is the next step? Wouldn't law enforcement be involved there, or what happens to that child?
Yeah, well, I mean, if they're under the age, then they need to be reported. But people like Covenant Houses across the country, I think they have 8 or 10 units of Covenant House where underage kids can go. But that's far and few between. Yeah, law enforcement would get involved if they're under 18.
Yeah, bringing up Covenant House, when I was referring to organizations that I donate to on a monthly basis, and for our listeners who do want to do something, whether or not that is what you do, going out and interacting directly, but donating to Covenant House would be a really helpful thing. Would you agree with that, Karen?
Yes, most definitely. It's a really good organization.
We'll make sure we put that in the show notes and that we put that up of places where they can participate and donate. When I read your work and your legacy, this feels like a snowball. It starts with you giving a woman a sandwich, and now here you are leading these organizations and inspiring everybody. And it started with taking the time to not only give the sandwich, but then to know the person. I just want to hear more about the snowball, what your organization does now, and how many people are working and how many people are helping, that all started with you giving a woman a sandwich.
Yeah, we have 200 affiliates in 43 states.
Wow.
And that means, an organization that provides shelter and meals. And typically an affiliate has at least 1,000 volunteers, sometimes more. And the reason so many volunteers are involved is that religious congregations come together. And even though they have different faith, it doesn't matter. They all agree on helping those in need. So they take turns a week at a time on rotation with others. So the typical, let's say, religious congregation then houses people in their building about once a quarter. So it's very doable. And that's where volunteers begin to get involved, sometimes for the first time in, certainly talking to somebody who's experiencing homelessness. And it can be life-changing sometimes for the volunteers and their kids. There's many reports of children who volunteered who then chose social work. Family Promise probably had an impact on that, but we provide the opportunity for people to get involved and make a difference. And some of those relationships continue today.
I think that's something beautiful is the way in which you're talking about these are friendships. And it's really beautiful because it counters the narrative of this is the other. You're saying, I'm not just helping like this poor soul. You're saying this person is my friend. I'm getting to know them.
We call them hosts and guests, not the homeless or the workers,
hosts
but
and guests.
Hosts, the volunteers and guests, families experiencing homelessness.
What does the volunteer work entail?
They agree to volunteer about once a quarter, and they may set up the beds in classrooms in the congregation. They prepare meals, they serve meals, they sit down and have a meal with the families or guests. Sometimes they invite their kids. And then there's activities after dinner if the guests choose to participate, whether it's a gym and playing basketball or other kinds of things that they can do.
Gosh, that's so beautiful. What are some of the things that the volunteers have expressed to you about what the work means for them?
Well, like Kim, one of our volunteers said that her children, she had 5 children, and they regularly volunteered with her growing up. 2 of them went on to either social work, and one became a doctor and worked overseas. Yeah, volunteers appreciate the opportunity to give back.
I mean, we are absolutely honored to participate in the small way of elevating your voice, bringing your voice to our listeners. I'm really hoping that they'll be inspired by this.
Good.
Even if it's a small act of kindness, maybe we'll create some more snowballs. Somebody's going to give a sandwich to somebody, then in a few years, it's one of the most beautiful snowball stories I've ever heard.
Yeah, that's so true. And when I first started, I was so anxious to find a building. I was looking everywhere for a building to provide shelter, and there were so many roadblocks that I couldn't find a building. But then I realized maybe God wanted me to build community, because when I couldn't find a building, I created what I thought was second best, which was rotational program. But the rotational program allowed so many volunteers to be involved. I didn't know it, but we were creating community, which is just a beautiful thing. And some of those relationships still exist today.
Now I think I have the words to express what makes your work so unique and so impactful when you're talking about relationships and community instead of work. I think that if we treat the volunteering as, okay, I'm going to go do the soup kitchen thing and I'm going to go back to my life, that's not what is required. And that somebody who is in need or is in a state where they are in some sort of shelter, transitional housing, one of the ways for their spirits to be lifted is to feel like they are part of a community. The more attached you get to your neighbors, the more fun you have with see the kids play, then you become more invested. And that is one of the reasons why somebody who is unhoused, that actually elevates in order to get out of that situation, because they've got these relationships.
The community, yeah, it's all about.
My goodness.
It's about relationships. Yeah.
What a joy to talk to you. What a privilege. Thank you. Thank you. We're excited to tell everyone about your book.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Good is in the Details is produced by Dr. Gwendolyn Dolske and Rudy Salo. If this episode has you thinking more, or any of our other episodes, please share it with a friend or visit us on Patreon, where we extend the philosophical questions. We've got a book club, and we'd love for you to be part of our community. Patreon.com/goodisinthedetails. We're also on Facebook and Instagram, Good is in the Details Pod. Check out our link to Robin Buckley's podcast, That's What She Said. And I'll also be linking more podcasting and philosophy resources. Okay, until next time, bye.